Book 3, The Web of Simulacra as an Entropic Cognitive Field. The Runaway Frame Problem and the Expansion of Cognitive Entropy. The web of simulacra is not just a social or cultural construct, but an ontological field, a recursive expansion of self-referential frames that dissolve volitional clarity. Like an unchecked frame problem, the web metastasizes, dragging perception further into an entropic vortex where salience becomes arbitrary and will erodes under an excess of false choices. This is the mental fractalization of reality, where each layer of mediation adds complexity but removes direct experience. The self-assembling maze. The web of simulacra is like a self-generating labyrinth. Every attempt to map it creates more complexity rather than revealing an exit. This is why rational deconstruction alone cannot liberate an individual from the simulacrum. Something more fundamental, an act of volitional negentropy, is required. We'll be using negentropy to basically as a stand-in for the word negative entropy, reversing of entropy. The second law of thermodynamics and the descent into simulacrum. Just as physical systems trend towards higher entropy, so too does the cognitive field when left unchecked. The web of simulacra is the mental equivalent of heat death, a world where everything is information but nothing is meaningful. The simulacrum is not merely an illusion. It is an inevitable entropic drift in cognition resulting from undisciplined attention and fragmented volition. Cognitive heat death. If entropy is disorder, then cognitive entropy is the dissolution of will's ability to distinguish, prioritize, and act with sovereignty. Just as biological life resists thermodynamic entropy by maintaining order, will must resist cognitive entropy by reconstructing perception. Negentropy as the ordering principle of will. Negentropy is the process of reintroducing volitional structure into cognition, reversing the entropic collapse of the simulacrum. The individual becomes the ordering force, applying selective constraints to perception rather than passively absorbing external frames. Negentropy is not about limiting perception, but about reclaiming control over what is salient. The sword of discernment. Like the sword of Manjushri, the will must cut away the unnecessary, honing perception into an active force rather than a passive receiver. The path forward is not through accumulation, but through distillation, unburdening perception from the unnecessary, the trivial, and the imposed. Chapter 2. Restructuring the mind against entropic drift. Cognitive negentropy, shifting perception towards meaningful patterns. Perception is not passive reception. It is an active construction of reality. The web of simulacra hijacks salience, filling perception with arbitrary, fragmented, and externally imposed frames. To reclaim will, one must restructure perception, shifting from passive absorption of external frames to active recognition of meaningful patterns. This is done through volitional negentropy, where cognition is trained to recognize and prioritize symbolic significance over noise. The salience compass. Imagine a compass that always points towards meaning, depth, and personal sovereignty. This compass already exists. It is the will, but it has been buried under cognitive entropy. The practice of negentropic perception is about realigning this compass so it orients perception towards what is truly meaningful rather than the arbitrary. The two pillars of cognitive negentropy. Symbolic resonance, tuning perception into meaning. The mind is inherently symbolic. It processes reality not as raw data, but as patterns of significance. Symbolic resonance is the practice of amplifying what is meaningful while dampening noise, attuning perception to archetypal, mythic, and deeply personal symbols that align with the divine will. How it works. Instead of trying to process everything, one must train the mind to respond only to signals that generate deep resonance. These signals can be personal symbols, mythic archetypes, or spontaneous synchronicities that speak directly to the individual's path. This is the opposite of the simulacrum, which presents endless information without resonance, flat, artificial, and devoid of true meaning. The Resonance Journal. Each day, write down 3 things that felt deeply symbolic or meaningful, whether an event, an image, a dream, or a phase that stood out. Reflect on why they resonated and how they might be part of a pattern guiding your will. Over time, this will retrain perception to prioritize meaning over noise. Reverse frame problem thinking, learning what to ignore. The frame problem is the inability to determine what matters. A mind overwhelmed by excess frames becomes paralyzed. The solution is not to try and process everything, but to cultivate the art of strategic ignorance. Reverse frame problem thinking is the practice of learning what to ignore, so the cognition is focused and sharpened rather than diffused into entropy. The negentropic cut. Each morning, identify one category of information that you will deliberately ignore for the day, whether social media, political discourse, trivial conversations, or any external simulacrum that drains cognitive energy. Each week, try to dedicate at least one day where you are immersed in the creation of the divine, nature, not the creation of man. Nature's signs and symbols are faithful to the divine harmony. The creation of man, on the other hand, is the simulacrum, where signs become ever less faithful and anchored to their true meaning and purpose. Given enough time, the natural harmony is absorbed into personal harmony through osmosis and exercised through the will. Notice how much cognitive space is freed and how much perception becomes clear without excess frames. Over time, this practice will train the sword of discernment, making the mind an active force rather than a passive receiver. Cognitive praxis, that training the negentropic mind. These practices must not be abstract theories, but daily disciplines that actively restructure perception. A negentropic mind is one that filters stimuli based on symbolic resonance, amplifying meaning while dampening noise, practices strategic ignorance, eliminating the irrelevant before it clutters cognition, orients itself towards the divine will, using a sharpened perception to navigate the world. The salience mandala. Draw a circle divided into 2 halves. On one side, write what you will prioritize, the symbols, ideas, and perceptions that resonate. On the other, write what you will ignore, the entropic distractions of the simulacrum. Place it where you can see it each morning as a cognitive map of your daily will. Synchronicity, the negentropic signal in the noise. The role of synchronicity in cognitive negentropy. In an entropic mind, perception is fragmented, overwhelmed by a sea of arbitrary information. Nothing seems to connect because meaning itself is scattered. As one reclaims will through symbolic resonance and reverse frame problem thinking, something shifts. Patterns emerge and reality begins to speak in synchronicities. Synchronicity is the opposite of noise. It is the alignment of internal and external meaning. Synchronicities are not coincidences. They are reflections of the inner world organizing itself. When synchronicities increase, it signals that cognition is becoming negentropic, aligning with the deeper structure of reality. However, not all synchronicities are affirmations. Many arise to highlight what must be confronted. Synchronicity as unveiling of the repressed. The unconscious does not communicate in rational arguments. It speaks in images, dreams, symbols, and synchronicities. When something is ignored, repressed, or unresolved, synchronicities repeat around it, trying to draw attention to the neglected aspects of the self. These are not random echoes. They are neglected fragments of the will attempting to reintegrate. A mind that resists transformation will see synchronicities as a coincidence. A mind that seeks alignment will recognize them as messages. If a theme recurs in synchronicity, it means attention is needed. Something buried must be faced, processed, or integrated before will can move forward. Recognizing and engaging synchronicity. To engage synchronicity, one must pay attention to thematic recurrence. If the same symbols, numbers, names, or encounters keep appearing, they are not random. They are reflections of something unresolved or emergent. Interrogate the emotional resonance. How does the synchronicity make you feel? If it stirs discomfort, it likely points to an ignored wound. If it excites you, it may indicate a path forward. Apply the mirror principle. Synchronicities are mirrors of the inner state. Ask, what inside me is this reflecting? What truth am I avoiding that this is trying to reveal? Take action. Acknowledging a synchronicity is not enough. It is a call to action. If the pattern reflects an unresolved past, it must be addressed. If it reveals a direction forward, it must be acted upon. Synchronicity as a praxis of alignment. When actively engaged, a synchronicity becomes a guidance system, showing where will must direct its attention. The more one hones symbolic resonance and discernment, the stronger and clearer synchronicities become. A life aligned with will is filled with meaningful synchronicities, not because reality is changing, but because perception has been purified to see what was always there. The synchronicity map. Keep a small notebook. Every time a notable synchronicity occurs, write it down. After a few weeks, review for patterns. What themes emerge? Identify what these patterns reveal about your current state. What needs resolution? What path is opening? Act on what is revealed. This is the key. Chapter 3, the Volitional Negentropy Method, VNM. The purpose of VNM. The Volitional Negentropy Method, VNM, is a structured praxis designed to reverse the entropy of will, allowing the individual to clarify perception by removing cognitive noise, strengthen volitional force by disentangling will from external conditioning, align with the divine will by recognizing and integrating meaningful patterns. VNM is the active counterpart to volitional descent and reclamation, VDR, which was introduced earlier. While VDR retrieves lost aspects of will from the depths, VNM refines, sharpens, and directs will towards negentropic alignment. VNM is not a single exercise, but a methodology, structured into 3 progressive phases. 1. Cognitive negentropy. Reclaiming attention, filtering distractions, and increasing awareness of meaningful data. 2. Symbolic alignment. Enhancing sensitivity to patterns, archetypes, and synchronicities to synchronize perception with reality's deeper structure. 3. Volitional primacy. Strengthening the will's active force, ensuring that perception is not just clear, but directed with intent. Each phase contains theory, technique, and exercise, ensuring direct applicability. Phase 1. Cognitive negentropy. Understanding cognitive entropy. The web of simulacra generates informational noise, overwhelming perception with irrelevant stimuli. The default state of the modern mind is reactive, fragmented, and passive, constantly pulled by external forces. The first step of VNM is reducing cognitive entropy, creating a state of directed attention rather than scattered reaction. 2. The principles of selective attention. Attention is the fuel of will. Where attention flows, energy follows. Cognitive negentropy requires radical discernment, consciously choosing what enters and influences the mind. Every moment of attention given to the simulacra is a moment stolen from will. 3. Practical exercise. The attention audit. For one full day, record everything that captures your attention. What media do you consume? What thoughts dominate your mind? What external influences shape your perception? Review the audit. Identify entropy sources. What wastes attention? What provides clarity and insight? Implement a purge. Reduce low-value information intake. Establish daily periods of uninterrupted focus. Begin a practice of intentional mental curation, choosing what enters the mind. This creates a foundation for symbolic alignment. Phase 2, symbolic alignment. 1. The importance of patterns in perception. The mind craves structure. It is wired to detect patterns. In an entropic state, perception is filled with irrelevant patterns, media cycles, trivial discourse. In an aligned state, perception locks into meaningful structures, revealing the hidden order in apparent chaos. 2. The principle of symbolic resonance. The universe is not random, it is symbolically structured. The key to alignment is to recognizing the symbols that resonate with the will. Symbolic resonance means distinguishing deep meaning from superficial noise, recognizing synchronicity as a signal, not coincidence. 3. The symbolic journal. For 7 days, record any symbol, pattern, or synchronicity that stands out. Reflect on why it resonates. Ask, why did this capture my attention? What internal state does it reflect? What does it reveal about my current path? Identify personal archetypal symbols. Over time, specific symbols will recur. These are keys to your personal alignment. Phase 3. Volitional primacy. 1. The concept of will as a directive force. Negentropy alone is not enough. Will must be active, not just receptive. Volitional primacy means shifting from passive recognition of patterns to active engagement with them. 2. The principle of willful integration. When patterns emerge, they must be acted upon. This is the difference between mere recognition and true volitional mastery. 3. Practical exercise, the 3-action rule. Identify a synchronicity, pattern, or insight that emerges. Take 3 concrete actions based off it within 48 hours. If a symbol recurs, engage with its deeper meaning. If an opportunity presents itself, take immediate action. If resistance arises, analyze what is blocking the will. This practice ensures that insight translates into movement. The power of VNM. VNM is a daily discipline, not a one-time exercise. The will is either entropic, scattered, and passive, or negentropic, focused and active. Through cognitive negentropy, symbolic alignment, and volitional primacy, the individual purifies their perception, attunes to meaningful structures, and acts with volitional force. Book 4. Infinite Archetype Theory. Chapter 1. The Archetypal Nature of Reality. The Volitist recognizes that all things, every object, thought, action, and being are archetypes. This truth extends beyond the limited frameworks of classical archetypal psychology and mysticism, which isolate only a handful of fundamental symbols. Instead, we assert that archetypes are infinite, that reality itself is a projection of archetypal truths, and that human consciousness exists as the mechanism through which these archetypes are encountered, processed, and synthesized. Everything we perceive is an archetype, not merely recurrent symbols like the hero or the shadow, but the very existence of a tree, a door, a flame, a river, a name, a whisper. Every event is an archetypal manifestation, a reflection of underlying internal truths that seek recognition. Even thought itself is archetypal. Our mind does not create meaning arbitrarily, but is constantly attempting to interpret and synthesize the infinite archetypal structures that define reality. The Volitist does not simply analyze archetypes, but lives within them, recognizing that every moment, every interaction, and every sensation is an encoded expression of deeper metaphysical realities. The fracturing of archetypal wholeness. Why then does humanity struggle to perceive reality as it truly is? Because we exist in a fractured state, the same fracturing described in anthrogenesis, where the one became many. Consciousness is the process of fragmentation. We are not born with a unified understanding of the infinite archetype, but must painstakingly reconstruct it. The collective unconscious, the subconscious, and the shadow exist as storage for unprocessed archetypes, the archetypes we have encountered but failed to integrate. The simulacrum deepens the fracture. Modern society bombards us with synthetic, hollow representations of archetypes, further severing us from authentic recognition. The Volitist seeks to reunify the fragmented archetypal field, to restore the seamless perception of reality where nothing is random, nothing is disconnected, nothing is meaningless. The archetypal feedback loop, perception, recognition, synthesis. The Volitist achieves this by training the mind and body to exist in a perpetual state of archetypal recognition and synthesis. This requires a threefold process. Perception, to see everything as an archetype. Every person, every action, every word carries an encoded reality waiting to be deciphered. Recognition, to acknowledge the deeper truth beneath the surface. Nothing is neutral. Every encounter is an invitation to deeper alignment. Synthesis, to integrate the archetypal truth into oneself, ensuring that no archetype remains unprocessed, thus eliminating fragmentation. When this cycle becomes automatic, the practitioner transcends the fractured state and enters a seamless state of being, where every breath, every motion, and every thought aligns with the divine will. At the culmination of this process, the Volitist no longer perceives archetypes as external forces to be interpreted. They become the archetype itself. Their very existence becomes an expression of the divine will. Every action becomes an unbroken act of cosmic alignment. The self ceases to be divided from reality, but is reality itself. This is the true goal of Volitism, not merely to understand, but to embody, to become a living, breathing, walking manifestation of the divine, where perception and will are one and the same. Chapter 2, on movement. Practice Qigong, Tai Chi, and Yoga. The unity of body and mind. Movement, when performed with meditative focus, creates a feedback loop between the body and mind. Conscious, intentional movement prevents the mind from wandering and anchors awareness into the present moment. This embodied cognition helps dissolve the typical fragmentation between thought and action, which is often a source of internal dissonance. Breath as the conductor of will. Breath control is central to all these practices. In yoga, pranayama regulates energy. In Tai Chi and Qigong, breath flows in sync with movement, directing Qi, or life force. Breath serves as a bridge between autonomic and conscious control, allowing the practitioner to influence their nervous system, emotional state, and depth of presence. This direct engagement with one's physiological rhythms enhance both volitional mastery and flow states. Rhythmic cyclical motion inducing flow. Repetitive flowing movements naturally entrain the mind into alpha and theta brainwave states, which are associated with deep relaxation, heightened awareness, and effortless action. This state of flow is characterized by unself-conscious movement, where action and awareness become one. It mirrors what many mystics describe as an alignment with the divine will, movement occurring through you rather than being forced by you. Symbolic resonance and archetypal motion. Many of these practices encode archetypal movements that mirror cosmic principles. Tai Chi, for example, embodies yin-yang balance, shifting between contraction and expansion, reflecting the breadth of the universe itself. Similarly, yoga postures often mimic natural forces, trees, animals, warriors, aligning the practitioner with primal archetypes of existence. Microcosm-macrocosm alignment. By harmonizing breath, movement, and intent, the practitioner attunes themselves to a larger rhythm, whether that be natural cycles, energetic fields, or divine will. This creates an effect similar to entrainment, where an individual being synchronizes with higher order harmonics, breaking free from the chaotic dissonance of everyday life. Engagement with the subtle body. These disciplines often acknowledge an energetic anatomy, chakras, meridians, chi pathways, which can be accessed through movement. Even if understood metaphorically, these practices offer a method to recalibrate one's internal structure, breaking stagnant patterns and restoring a state of inner clarity. Ritual as a means of unlocking the will. Repetitive, meaningful movement creates a ritualized structure that allows a deeper entrainment into a desired state. Like the Volitist practice of the dual luminaries, these movements serve as embodied invocations, focusing intent through motion, allowing one to channel will into the physical world. Why it works for divine alignment and flow. The state of flow arises when the ego dissolves, the body acts effortlessly, and the mind is engaged in the present task. These practices accelerate the process by overriding discursive thought through rhythmic movement, bridging the conscious and subconscious through breath and presence, aligning microcosmic actions with macrocosmic principles, allowing will to move through the practitioner rather than being obstructed by internal resistance. These disciplines train the reclaimer to shift from passive reaction to active embodiment of will, allowing greater access to volitional mastery. Chapter 3, Volitional Flow Praxis, training the body to align with the infinite archetype. Now that we have established the theory of the infinite archetype, we must actualize it through structured praxis that will allow the Volitist to enter and remain in a state of perpetual divine alignment. This is not a temporary meditative practice, but a total transformation of movement, breath, and perception, so that every action, every motion, every breath is an expression of divine will. Core principles of volitional flow praxis. The praxis is built upon three interwoven pillars. Breath as a bridge between conscious and unconscious will. Breath is the interface between autonomic and volitional control. By training breath to be perpetually intentional, we merge conscious agency with subconscious alignment. This is the key to making divine flow an effortless, permanent state, rather than something that fades after practice. Movement as an archetypal expression. Every motion is imbued with archetypal significance. Nothing is random, nothing is wasted. Just as Tai Chi, Yoga, and Qigong use structured forms, volitional flow praxis will train movements that condition the practitioner to feel and enact archetypal synthesis. Eventually, this becomes automatic, meaning that even the simplest act, walking, sitting, lifting an object, is in total synchronicity with the divine will. Perception as a constant archetypal recognition. The Volitist must train the mind to never lose sight of the archetypal nature of reality. Every object, every person, every movement, and every moment must be recognized as an archetypal truth, rather than a mere thing. This will be trained through focused observational exercises that rewire perception into a state of unbroken synthesis. When these three elements are combined, the practitioner ceases to experience movement as a mechanical function and instead moves as the living embodiment of the divine flow. Stages of training in volitional flow praxis. To ensure mastery, the praxis must be divided into three progressive stages. Stage 1, the reclamation of the breath. Before the Volitist can align their movement and perception, they must first reclaim control over the breath. This is the most fundamental interface between mind and body. Primary exercise, the rhythm of the divine will. A structured breathing technique where every inhale is an invocation of archetypal recognition and every exhale is an act of synthesis. Breath is slowed and extended in specific ratios to reinforce autonomic control and volitional intent. This will begin as a seated or standing practice and will later be integrated into all movement. Training goal, to make breath permanently volitional, never unconscious, never passive. To use breath as a constant point of reference for alignment with the divine will. Stage 2, the movements of archetypal synchrony. Once the breath is reclaimed, the body must be conditioned into fluid archetypal motion. This is the stage where the practitioner transforms mundane action into sacred embodiment. Primary exercise, the 8 archetypal forms. Instead of generic movements, the Volitist will learn 8 fundamental and archetypal motions, each one corresponding to core principles of volitional mastery. These forms are not rigid like traditional martial arts katas, but are instead designed to awaken archetypal resonance in the body. Every movement will be tied to breath and intention, reinforcing the infinite archetype in action. Training goal: to condition the body to move only in alignment with archetypal truths, to dissolve any hesitation, sloppiness, or unconscious movement, replacing it with deliberate volitional action. Stage 3, the praxis of perpetual divine flow. Once the Volitist has mastered archetypal breath and movement, the final stage is to remove the training wheels and enter full, permanent synchrony with the divine will. Primary exercise: the walking embodiment of the archetype. The practitioner will be guided into moving through everyday life while maintaining unbroken recognition, breath control, and archetypal motion. This is where we break the final barrier, the illusion that there is a practice and a real life. Everything is practice. Everything is life. Everything is alignment. Training goal: to make the divine flow a perpetual, effortless state. To eliminate all moments of unconsciousness, ensuring that every breath, every movement, every thought is a flawless expression of volitional mastery. The end state, the perpetual living divine. At the culmination of this praxis, the practitioner is no longer simply practicing volitional flow. They are volitional flow. They no longer do archetypal movement. They move only in archetypes. They no longer focus on breath. It is always volitional. They no longer try to align with the divine. They are already aligned. At this stage, the Volitist walks as the living existential divine, permanently in harmony with the infinite archetype, permanently aware, present, intentional, and untouchable by the fractures of the simulacrum. Chapter 4, the breath of divine will. The metaphysical and archetypal significance of breath. Breath is the first and final action of existence. Before the mind awakens, before movement is willed, before language is formed, breath flows. It is the bridge between the known and the unknown, the seen and the unseen, the voluntary and the involuntary. To the Volitist, breath is the primordial archetype, the first fractal of existence, the pulse of the divine fracturing into multiplicity. In Vedic thought, prana is not mere air, but the very essence of life itself, an omnipresent energy that interweaves all being. In Taoist cosmology, the breath is the rhythm of qi, the movement of the Tao in microcosm. In Volitism, breath is both, the thread of the infinite archetype running through all things. Every inhale is an act of receiving the divine archetype's essence, drawing in order from chaos, form from formlessness, will from the abyss. Every exhale is an act of synthesis and expression, transmuting breath into action, movement, and volitional mastery. The body is not just a vessel, but a conduit for breath to shape existence itself. Thus, breath is not a passive function. It is the anchor that binds man to the divine flow. The problem, however, is that modern man breathes without awareness, a passive, fragmented act that mirrors his fragmented consciousness. Just as the will slumbers in the web of simulacra, so too does the breath become shallow, unconscious, and reactive. To reclaim the breath is to awaken the will. This chapter will reveal how to harness breath as a permanent volitional force, uniting it with movement and awareness until the practitioner is no longer separate from the divine flow, but is it, embodied. The physiological mechanics of divine breath work. To transform breath into an instrument of volitional mastery, we must reclaim control over the depth of breath, ensuring full diaphragmatic inhalations that maximize pranic absorption, the rhythm of breath, creating an intentional cycle that entrains the body, mind, and nervous system in harmonic flow. The intent of breath, linking breath to conscious volition so that every inhale and exhale is a deliberate act. Depth of breath, the reclamation of vital energy. The unconscious man breathes shallowly, drawing breath only into his upper lungs. This starves the system of vital prana and reinforces a state of passivity and reaction. The Volitist, by contrast, descends breath into the depths of being, activating the diaphragm, expanding the lower abdomen, and drawing prana to the root of the will. The breath of the reclaimer. Exercise. Inhale deeply through the nose, allowing the diaphragm to expand downward like a filling vessel. The abdomen should rise fully, not just the chest. This ensures that vital energy saturates the entire being. Exhale slowly and completely, ensuring no stagnation. Continue this cycle until breath no longer feels forced, but flows as a natural extension of will. Rhythm of breath, synchronizing with the macrocosm. Once depth is reclaimed, breath must be disciplined into a cosmic rhythm, one that aligns the microcosmic breath of the practitioner with the larger breath of existence. The divine ratio. Inspired by ancient breath patterns, this technique structures breath into a cycle that mirrors the fractal rhythm of the divine. Inhale for 4 counts, receiving essence. Hold for 4 counts, crystallizing intent. Exhale for 4 counts, synthesizing into action. Hold for 4 counts, returning to stillness. This rhythm is a breath of the infinite archetype, entraining the Volitist into alignment, not just during practice, but as a permanent state. Intent of breath, anchoring the practitioner in divine flow. Breath without intent is mere respiration, but breath with intent becomes the axis of volitional mastery. Every inhale must be recognized as an act of reception, not simply oxygen, but the absorption of archetypal energy. Every exhale must be recognized as an act of creation, the expression of the divine will into the manifest world. Every hold between breaths is the silent moment of synthesis, the space where chaos meets order, where intention becomes reality. To practice this, the Volitist must internalize breath as a ritual, not something they do, but rather something they become. How to breathe for permanent alignment. The ultimate goal is not just to practice this breath work in meditation, but to embody it permanently. Every breath, every moment must be deep, activating the full capacity of being, rhythmic, synchronized with the eternal flow of the macrocosm, intentional, a conscious act of alignment with the divine will. The final practice, the breath of the living divine. Once breath is fully reclaimed, it will no longer be something that must be practiced. It will become the default state of existence. The practitioner will no longer experience moments of unconscious breath. Every inhale and exhale will be an act of sacred recognition. Even in moments of exertion, stress, or crisis, breath will remain anchored in volitional mastery. This is the state where the practitioner ceases to be in flow and instead becomes flow itself. Chapter 5. The 8 Archetypal Forms, Divine Motion in Alignment with the Will. Movement as a living praxis of the infinite archetype. The purpose of the 8 archetypal forms. The breath has been reclaimed as the bridge between the conscious and unconscious, the microcosm and the macrocosm, the divine and the individual will. Now we must embody this alignment through movement. In many traditions, movement-based praxis, yoga, tai chi, qigong, harness flow states, but in Volitism we take this further. Every movement must reflect a fundamental archetypal principle, a distilled essence of the infinite archetypes we encounter daily. Each form must be performed in full volitional control, seamlessly synchronizing breath, motion, and intent. Ultimately, these movements will not remain as a separate practice, but will train the practitioner to move through daily life with the same archetypal precision, fluidity, and divine alignment. The 8 archetypal forms serve as the codex of sacred movement, encoding universal principles of volitional mastery into embodied practice. The structure of each archetypal form. Each movement will be encoded with 1. The archetypal principle. What universal truth does this movement embody? 2. The physical motion, the actual structure and flow of the movement. 3. The breath synchronization, how breath and motion align. 4. The intent and volitional action, The internal awareness and manifestation of will during the movement. 5. The application beyond practice. How this movement becomes a living principle in daily life. The 8 archetypal forms. Each movement reflects an essential force of volitional mastery, mirroring the primal interplay of the infinite archetypes, the ultimate goal, the perpetual praxis of divine motion. These 8 archetypal forms must begin as practice, but ultimately they will become the way the Volitist moves through life. Each and every step must be conscious. Every motion must be archetypal. Every breath, movement, and action becomes part of the continuous feedback loop between microcosm and macrocosm. When perfected, there is no practice, only living, breathing, volitional mastery. Number 1. The form of the axis. The form of the axis. The stillness at the center of all things. Archetypal principle. The unmoving center, the eye of the storm. The eternal axis of the divine will. The world moves, but the reclaimer remains sovereign. Physical motion. The practitioner stands with feet grounded, spine upright, hands resting at the center line, hara or solar plexus. All motion initiates and returns to this stance, ensuring awareness of the center point of will. Breath synchronization. Inhale, expand the diaphragm and envision the stability rooting into the infinite. Exhale, release external noise, reinforcing internal sovereignty. Intent and volitional action. This is the stance of absolute awareness, embodying the pillar of self-determined being. Application beyond practice. The practitioner learns to carry this stillness into action, never losing the internal axis even in movement. 2. The form of the serpent. The flowing adaptability of the will. Archetypal principle. The serpent is fluidity, adaptability, and mastery over change. It moves without resistance, yet remains completely in control. Physical motion. The body moves in coiling, undulating arcs, shifting weight seamlessly between stances. Movements mirror the serpent weaving through reality, a continuous, intentional, non-hesitant action. Breath synchronization. Inhale, draw in the energy of adaptability. Exhale, let go of rigidity and flow seamlessly with intent. Intent and volitional action. Movement and thought must become one seamless flow, reacting without hesitation, yet always with purpose. Application beyond practice. This trains the perpetual volitional response, never stuck, never frozen, always moving with the flow of the will rather than against it. 3. The form of the inferno. Will as an unstoppable force of creation and destruction. Archetypal principle. The inferno is the fire of transformation, embodying relentless volitional force. It purifies, destroys, and creates anew. Physical motion. Rapid, forceful strikes and movements, bursting forth from the center like flames consuming hesitation. Arms and legs extended in sharp, decisive gestures. No uncertainty. No retraction. Breath synchronization. Inhale, draw power into the core. Exhale, explosive release, assertion of the divine will. Intent and volitional action. Movement must be absolute once committed. There is no retreat. This form burns away fear, hesitation, and passivity. Application beyond practice. The practitioner trains themselves to act with absolute conviction, cutting through doubt as fire consumes illusion. 4. The form of the veil, mastery over the unseen and unmanifested. Archetypal principle. The veil is mystery, paradox, and unseen mastery, the control of what is not yet revealed. Physical motion, slow, deliberate weaving movements that conceal and reveal like the unfolding of a hidden truth. Hands and body shift in controlled, flowing concealment and emergence patterns. Breath synchronization. Inhale, Draw in unseen potential. Exhale. Reveal only what is necessary. Retain mastery over what is hidden. Intent and volitional action. Movement must always retain an element of mystery, never fully exposing, always commanding the unknown. Application beyond practice. The practitioner learns to control what they reveal, mastering presence, perception, and the strategic use of hidden will. Number 5, the form of the expanding horizon, the boundless reach of will into the infinite. Archetypal principle, expansion of consciousness, vision, and volitional reach. The realization that will is limitless, only bound by perception and assumption. The movement outward, the unfolding of greater awareness and capacity. Physical motion, the practitioner extends their limbs outward, opening fully. Movements create expanding circles and spirals, as if pushing through unseen boundaries. Steps are deliberate yet exploratory, always reaching beyond prior limits. Breath synchronization. Inhale, draw in infinite potential. Exhale, expand the will into the unseen. Intent and volitional action. Each movement represents breaking through perceived limitations. The practitioner must fully believe in the infinite reach of their will. Application beyond practice. One must never shrink away from expansion, always seeking new frontiers of growth and mastery. This form teaches that what one assumes to be impossible is merely unclaimed potential. Number 6, the form of the binding coil, the interwoven dance of unity and control. Archetypal principle, interconnection, synthesis, and mastery over disparate elements. The realization that will is strongest when harmonized with the whole. The act of binding forces together, bringing harmony to chaos. Physical motion, movements coil and interweave, arms spiraling, steps looping back before flowing forward. The practitioner moves as if weaving unseen threads, creating a lattice of control. There is constant motion, never static, yet always balanced. Breath synchronization. Inhale, draw together fragmented energies. Exhale, weave them into a singular force. Intent and volitional action. This is the form of integration of turning chaos into order. One must feel completely at home with complexity, never overwhelmed by the multiplicity of existence. Application beyond practice. The practitioner learns to bring conflicting elements into harmony, be it thoughts, emotions, or external circumstances. This form cultivates the ability to navigate and unify disparate aspects of reality. Number 7, the form of the serving blade, the sacred act of cutting away illusion and attachment. Archetypal principle, the necessity of destruction in pursuit of purity, the power of removing what no longer serves the divine will. The blade is both a weapon and a scalpel, cutting falsehoods, illusions, and excess. Physical motion, the body moves in precise cutting gestures, arms slicing through space. Steps are hard, decisive, without hesitation. The practitioner never lingers, never doubts, only executes. Breath synchronization. Inhale, summon clarity, recognize what must be cut away. Exhale, strike cleanly, severing illusion. Intent and volitional action. Every movement must be completely final. There is no wavering, no second guessing. The practitioner embodies the understanding that sacrifice is a sacred act, making space for greater alignment. Application beyond practice. One must not fear severing ties with falsehoods, limiting beliefs, or stagnant realities. This form teaches how to recognize when something no longer serves the will and act decisively to remove it. Number 8, the form of the absolute will, the motionless movement where all forms resolve into one. Archetypal principle, the final state of volitional mastery. The realization that there is no separation between self, action, and the divine will. The practitioner is no longer bound by archetypes, but has become the living embodiment of all of them. Physical motion. The practitioner moves seamlessly between all other forms, shifting without pause or transition. Movements appear paradoxical, both spontaneous and inevitable, effortless yet absolute. At times, there is no movement at all, yet the will is undeniably active. Breath synchronization. Inhale, recognize the totality of will. Exhale, dissolve into it. Intent and volitional action. This form is no longer about practice, but full embodiment, a state where movement is no longer something one does, but something one is. The practitioner has become the walking, the breathing, the thinking, the divine motion. Application beyond practice. This is perpetual praxis. There is no separation between the discipline and the daily life. The practitioner moves through the world with perfect volitional alignment, never in conflict, never in hesitation. The 8 archetypal forms, a completed system. With the completion of all 8 archetypal forms, the codex of movement in volitism is now whole. Number 1, the form of the axis, the eternal stillness of the sovereign will. Number 2, the form of the serpent, the flowing adaptability of the master. Number 3, the form of the inferno, the unstoppable force of transformation. Number 4, the form of the veil, the mastery of the unseen. Number 5, the form of the expanding horizon, the infinite reach of the will. Number 6, the form of the binding coil, the interwoven dance of control. Number 7, the form of the severing blade, the sacred act of cutting away. Number 8, the form of the absolute will, the final state where all motion resolves into one. Each practitioner must begin by training these movements in sequence, but ultimately, the goal is for them to transcend the forms entirely, allowing all movements to flow directly from the divine will. Chapter 6, the initiation process, entering the path of the divine motion. The gateway to perpetual alignment with the will. The initiation into the 8 archetypal forms is not merely the learning of movements, but the dissolution of hesitation, doubt, and unconscious action in favor of absolute volitional alignment. The initiate must pass through 3 distinct phases, each stripping away layers of dissonance and conditioning to prepare the body, mind, and will for full integration with divine motion. The initiation process is structured as follows. Number 1, the unbinding, severance from the web of simulacra. Number 2, the attunement, synchronization with the 8 forms and breath. Number 3, the embodiment, dissolution of separation between praxis and life. This is not simply a ritual, it is a reprogramming of reality itself as experienced by the practitioner. Phase 1, the unbinding, severance from the web of simulacra. Purpose, strip away unconscious movement, reactive action, and passive existence. Identify where one's motion is dictated by external forces rather than divine will. Instill absolute bodily awareness. Every step, breath, and gesture must be conscious. Initiatory rite, the silent walk. The initiate must walk a specific distance in absolute total silence. No speaking, no reacting, no unnecessary motion. Every movement must be intentional. No fidgeting, no automatic reactions, no conscious shifts in posture. The initiate must be fully aware of the breath, synchronizing each step with the inhale and exhale. Any lapse into automatic thinking or thought or behavior requires starting over. This process is repeated until the initiate can move in absolute control without external stimulus dictating their movement. Outcome. The initiate realizes how much of their movement has been hijacked by conditioning, how often they shift, pace, or fidget, or react without will. Through this practice, the first veil is lifted, motion is reclaimed. Phase 2, the attunement, synchronization with the 8 forms and breath. Purpose, train the body to breathe and move in complete volitional unity. Synchronize each motion to breath so movement becomes a seamless extension of intent. Begin embodying the 8 forms, using them to reshape how action is taken. Initiatory rite, the ritual of the eightfold breath. The initiate performs each of the 8 forms in a single sequence, ensuring breath is perfectly in sync with motion. No movement is unconscious or automatic. The will is fully engaged in each shift, gesture, and transition. If at any moment breath and motion fall out of alignment, this sequence must be restarted. This practice rewires the autonomic nervous system, making conscious action the default state. Outcome: the initiate merges breath, motion, and volition, laying the foundation for full integration. The body is no longer a passive vessel, but an instrument of divine will. Phase 3, the embodiment, dissolution of separation between praxis and life. Purpose: eliminate the distinction between practice and daily existence. Ensure every movement, action, and breath is permanently volitional. Integrate the 8 forms into daily tasks, so life itself becomes the art of divine motion. Initiatory rite, the ritual of eternal motion. The initiate must go through an entire day where every single movement follows the principles of the 8 forms. There can be no unnecessary or unaligned motion. Every step, breath, gesture, and action must be volitional. Eating, drinking, working, even interacting with others must be done in total alignment with breathwork and movement principles. The initiate must experience a full waking cycle of absolute volitional motion before final initiation. Outcome: the practitioner no longer separates practice from life. Movement is now permanently intentional and synchronized with the divine will. The final veil is lifted. There is no longer a distinction between the self and the motion of the universe. The final oath, the will manifested in flesh. Once the 3 phases are completed, the practitioner takes the final oath, declaring, "I move as the will moves. I breathe as the will breathes. There is no hesitation, no doubt, no division between myself and the divine motion. From this moment forth, every step, every motion, every breath is volitional. I do not act, I am the action. I do not move, I am the motion of the infinite." After this moment, the practitioner is fully initiated, and the 8 forms become their permanent state of being. Chapter 7, the path of the Volitist. Volitism is not a philosophy confined to words on a page, nor a practice limited to moments of ritual. It is a total transformation of existence. The path we have laid out is not simply a guide to self-discipline or a method for cultivating mindfulness. It is the blueprint for the reclamation of the will itself. Through the teachings in this treatise, the practitioner has learned that every action, thought, and breath can be brought into alignment with the divine will. That motion itself is sacred, not merely a means of movement, but the very expression of volition in its purest form. That the fractured archetypes of existence are not separated from the self, but aspects to be reintegrated, embodied, and harmonized until nothing else remains but absolute flow. This is not a path of fleeting enlightenment or temporary states of transcendence. The goal of the Volitist is not to achieve alignment for mere moments, but to live in a state of perpetual harmony with the divine. No longer reactive, no longer fragmented, no longer at war with the self, but a walking manifestation of the will itself. The journey forward. The completion of this text does not mark the end of the practitioner's journey. Rather, it signals the beginning of a new mode of being, one in which hesitation, unconscious action, and inner dissonance are no longer tolerated. From this moment forward, the Volitist moves with absolute intentionality. Every step is taken in awareness. Every breath is synchronized with the macrocosm. Every motion is an act of divine recognition. The web of simulacra may still surround us, but the Volitist no longer moves as the world commands. The external world may try to pull the practitioner into automation, but now every act is an assertion of sovereignty. Final words, the ultimate state of being. True volitional mastery is not a goal to be reached. It is a state to be lived. When there is no longer a distinction between thought and action, no gap between intention and motion, no break in the eternal rhythm of the divine flow, then the practitioners become more than human. They have become volition incarnate. They have become a conduit of the divine will. They have become the eternal motion. This is the path. This is the calling. Move as the will moves.